The storm raged on, the wind howling as rain pelted against Officer Michael Bennett's windshield. The city streets were eerily empty, the storm's ferocity driving even the hardiest of night wanderers indoors. The rhythmic swish of the wipers cut through the silence inside Michael's patrol car. But his mind was far from calm. Tonight, like many other nights, his thoughts drifted to his son, Ryan, now a stranger in his own life. It had been 3 years since the divorce. 3 long years since he'd come home to find his wife, Lauren, packing her bags, Ryan clinging to her leg. Michael had tried to stay involved in his son's life. But the weight of his badge and the bitterness of the custody battle had created a chasm too wide to bridge. Nights like this, cold and lonely, made the silence of his small apartment feel unbearable. As Michael turned onto a deserted avenue, his headlights caught a figure on the road, a child, small and frail, trudging through the downpour. He slammed on the brakes, his car skidding to a halt as his heart leaped into his throat. Throwing the door open, Michael stepped into the rain, the icy drops soaking through his uniform. "Hey, hey, you," he called out, his voice cutting through the storm. The child didn't stop. She walked forward, her tiny feet splashing through puddles, her arms clutching a soaked stuffed bunny. Michael's boots pounded against the pavement as he approached her, his hands raised in a gesture of reassurance. "Sweetheart, stop please," he said, his voice softer now. Finally, the little girl froze. She turned, and under the dim glow of a streetlight, he saw her face. Big, frightened eyes, tear-streaked cheeks, and a soaked dress clinging to her tiny frame. She couldn't have been more than 6. Michael crouched down, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "Are you okay? What's your name?" he asked gently. The girl hugged the stuffed bunny tighter, her lips trembling. "Amelia," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Amelia," he repeated, his heart breaking at the sound of her name. "Where's your mommy or daddy?" Her answer was a stab to his heart. "Mommy doesn't want me anymore." The words hung in the air, heavier than the storm around them. His chest tightening with a mix of anger and sorrow. How could anyone let a child end up like this, alone, abandoned, drenched in the cold rain? "It's okay, Amelia," he said, his voice firm but kind. "You're not alone anymore. I'm going to help you." Amelia didn't move at first, her wide eyes searching his face for something: trust, reassurance, safety. Slowly, she reached out, her small hand trembling as it slid into his. Michael held her hand gently, leading her to the warmth of his patrol car. Inside, he wrapped her in a dry blanket, adjusting the heater to chase away the chill. She sat quietly in the passenger seat, her stuffed bunny still clutched to her chest. Michael glanced at her, his mind racing. He had dealt with abandoned children before, had seen the worst humanity could offer. But this felt different. This wasn't just a case to solve or a report to file. Amelia's fear, her vulnerability, it struck something deep inside him. Perhaps it was because of Ryan, because of the nights he spent wondering if his son felt abandoned by him too. "Do you know where you live, Amelia?" he asked softly, keeping his eyes on the road. She shook her head, her wet curls bouncing slightly. "Mommy said I can't go back," she murmured, her voice breaking. Michael tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Okay, don't worry about that right now," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We'll figure this out together." As the patrol car's heater filled the air with warmth, Michael glanced at Amelia again. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but she fought to stay awake, as if afraid that falling asleep might make her disappear. He wished he could tell her everything would be okay, that he could promise her safety and love. But he knew it wasn't that simple. The road stretched on, the rain pounding against the car as they headed toward the precinct. Michael had no idea what the next steps would look like. But one thing was certain: he wasn't going to let Amelia down. Not now. Not ever. The precinct was quiet, save for the occasional ringing of a phone or the muffled voices of officers working late. Michael carried Amelia inside, her small frame bundled tightly in the blanket. Officer Karen Morales, a seasoned veteran in child welfare cases, looked up from her desk as they entered. Her kind eyes softened as they landed on the little girl in Michael's arms. "Michael," she said, standing. "What's this?" "She's alone," Michael replied, his voice heavy. "Found her wandering in the rain. Her name's Amelia." Karen approached, her voice dropping to a gentle tone. "Hi, Amelia. My name's Karen. Are you hungry, sweetheart?" Amelia nodded slowly, her grip on the blanket tightening. Karen gave Michael a knowing look before disappearing into the break room, returning moments later with a sandwich and a juice box. Michael watched as Amelia took the food with shaky hands, nibbling cautiously. She didn't speak, but her wide eyes darted between him and Karen, as if trying to gauge whether they were truly safe. "Do we have anything on file about her?" Michael asked Karen quietly. "I'll check," Karen said, already pulling up the system. "But if she's been abandoned, this could take time." Mikhail Sighet, running a hand through his rain-soaked hair. Time wasn't a luxury Amelia could afford. She needed answers, stability, and someone to show her she wasn't disposable. Karen's typing filled the silence as Amelia finished her sandwich. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but hopeful. "She's not in the system yet. No reports, no missing child alerts. But we'll contact child services." Michael nodded, his jaw tightening. "And in the meantime?" Karen gave him a small smile. "In the meantime, she needs someone to stay with her. Someone she trusts." Michael looked at Amelia, who had curled up on the couch, her bunny nestled under her chin. Her eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion finally overtaking her. For the first time that night, she looked at peace. "I'll stay," Michael said without hesitation. Over the next days, Michael began piecing together Amelia's story. Her mother, Lindsay, had a history of substance abuse and instability. There was no record of a father. Lindsay had vanished, leaving Amelia to fend for herself. The abandonment wasn't just physical, it was emotional. A wound far deeper than any Michael could fix overnight. But he tried. He visited Amelia daily as she adjusted to her foster placement, bringing her coloring books, reading her stories, and answering her endless questions about the world. Slowly, she began to trust him, her guarded demeanor softening with each visit. One day, as they sat in the park, Amelia turned to him with wide, searching eyes. "Why didn't Mommy want me?" Michael's heart clenched. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," he said gently. "But that doesn't mean you're not special. Amelia, you're amazing, and you deserve to be loved." Tears welled in her eyes, and for the first time, she climbed into his lap, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "Thank you," she whispered. Months passed, and Amelia's world grew brighter. Her laughter became more frequent, her drawings more colorful. Michael's visits became the highlight of her days. And for Michael, she became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the most broken hearts could heal. As Amelia's life stabilized, Michael found his own healing too. He reached out to Ryan, determined to rebuild the bridge he thought was lost. Slowly, father and son began to reconnect, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Amelia's story wasn't just about a little girl who found safety. It was about second chances, about love rising from the ashes of abandonment. And for Michael, it was about finding redemption in the most unexpected of places. The sunlight broke through the blinds of Officer Michael Bennett's apartment as he sat at the kitchen table, the faint aroma of coffee filling the air. In front of him lay a crayon drawing Amelia had given him just days ago, a picture of them together, smiling, holding hands under a bright sun. He traced the edges of her scrawled name at the bottom, Amelia plus Michael. His heart swelled with a mix of pride and sorrow. Since Amelia had come into his life, Michael's world had shifted. His late nights patrolling the streets no longer felt like empty routines. His days off, once spent in solitude, now revolved around visits to her foster home or calls to check in on her progress. Slowly, her laughter and resilience began to fill the hollow spaces inside him, the ones left by Ryan's absence and the echoes of his broken marriage. But her question from weeks earlier still haunted him. "Why did Mommy want me?" Michael had been unable to shake the weight of those words. He'd done everything in his power to show Amelia she was loved, that she mattered, but he knew the scars left by her mother's abandonment were deep. And yet, as much as Michael wanted to protect her, he also knew that facing her past was a crucial part of her healing. Amelia's foster parents, Mark and Diane, were kind and nurturing, creating a stable home for her. Their warmth had helped Amelia bloom in ways Michael hadn't thought possible. She was learning to trust again, and her guarded silence was giving way to curiosity, to joy. But one day, during a visit to the foster home, Diane pulled Michael aside. "She's been asking more about her mother," Diane said softly, her brow furrowed with concern. "I think it's important for her to have some answers, but we don't know how much she can handle." Michael nodded, the heaviness in his chest returning. He'd been trying to track down Lindsay for months, but her trail had gone cold. The thought of confronting the woman who had caused Amelia so much pain made his blood boil. But Michael also knew that if Lindsay could provide even a sliver of closure, it might help Amelia begin to heal. "I'll find her," he said, his voice resolute. "Amelia deserves the truth." Michael's search for Lindsay led him to the outskirts of the city, to a rundown motel nestled between abandoned warehouses. It was the kind of place where desperation lingered in the air, where people came to disappear. Lindsay Collins had been living there for weeks, according to the manager. When Michael knocked on the door of her room, it opened slowly, revealing a woman who barely resembled the mother Amelia might have once known. Her face was pale and gaunt, her eyes sunken with exhaustion. The smell of alcohol and stale air wafted out. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice defensive, her body tense. Michael's jaw tightened. He forced himself to remain calm, to set aside the anger threatening to bubble over. "I'm Michael Bennett. I'm a police officer," he said. "I've been looking after your daughter, Amelia." Lindsay's expression faltered, a flicker of recognition in her tired eyes. "Amelia," she repeated, her voice trembling. She's okay? She's safe," Michael said firmly. "But she's not okay. She's been through hell because you left her." Lindsay slumped against the doorframe, her shoulders shaking as tears filled her eyes. "I didn't mean to leave her like that," she whispered. I thought she'd be better off without me." Michael took a deep breath, his anger softening into something closer to pity. "She's been asking about you," he said. "She doesn't understand why you left." "I don't understand it either." Lindsay wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You don't know what it's like," she said, her voice cracking. "I couldn't take care of her. I was drowning financially, emotionally. I thought if I disappeared, someone better would take care of her." "You didn't disappear," Michael said sharply. "You abandoned her. You made her feel like she wasn't wanted." Lindsay's sobs grew louder, her fragile composure shattering. Michael felt torn. Part of him wanted to walk away, to let her wallow in the consequences of her choices. But another part of him, the part that had come to love Amelia like a daughter, knew that this broken woman was still a part of her story. And maybe, just maybe, Lindsay could find a way to make things right. "Amelia deserves answers," Michael said, his tone firm but not unkind. "She deserves to know that she's not to blame for any of this. If you want to fix this, you have to face her." The meeting was arranged carefully, with Mark and Diane present, along with Amelia's therapist. Michael was there too, a steady presence by Amelia's side. Lindsay arrived looking nervous and frail, but there was a glimmer of determination in her eyes, a sign that she wanted to try, even if she didn't know how. When Amelia saw her mother, she froze. Michael knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "It's okay, Amelia," he said softly. "You're safe." Amelia hesitated, her wide eyes fixed on Lindsay. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you leave me?" The room fell silent. Lindsay's lips trembled as tears streamed down her face. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said, her voice breaking. "But I was wrong. Amelia, I was so wrong." Amelia's small face crumpled as tears filled her eyes. "You didn't want me," she said, her voice trembling. "No, baby," Lindsay said, her voice filled with anguish. "I didn't know how to take care of you, but I always wanted you." I've always loved you." Michael watched as Amelia processed her mother's words, her little hands clutching her bunny for comfort. It wasn't a perfect moment, and it didn't erase the pain of what had happened, but it was a start, a fragile step toward healing. Months later, Amelia was thriving. She still lived with Mark and Diane, but Lindsay had become a part of her life in small, supervised visits. With therapy and support, Lindsay was beginning to rebuild herself, to earn back the trust she had lost. Michael remained a constant presence in Amelia's life. She called him Uncle Mike now, and her drawings often included him, a protector, a friend, a symbol of safety. For Michael, Amelia had brought something unexpected into his life: redemption. She had reminded him of his capacity to love, to protect, to make a difference. And as he watched her laugh and play, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The road ahead wasn't without challenges. But for Amelia, for Lindsay, and for Michael, it was a road worth traveling. Together, as the seasons changed, so did Amelia's world. What began as a fragile journey of trust and healing blossomed into a life filled with possibilities. She started school in the fall, nervously clutching her bunny in one hand and Michael's hand in the other. The transition wasn't without its hurdles. She was shy, hesitant to make new friends, and wary of strangers. But the supportive environment created by Mark, Diane, and Michael gave her the courage to try. At the foster home, she developed a love for art, filling sketch pads with colorful drawings of animals, trees, and smiling people. Her favorite subject, however, was Michael. Nearly every week, she handed him a new drawing, pictures of him as a superhero, a knight, or simply standing by her side. Each one melted his heart, reminding him of how far they had come. But Amelia wasn't the only one whose life had changed. Michael had felt something stir within him, something he hadn't felt in years. The relationship he had built with Amelia not only gave her hope, but also reignited his own. His days on patrol became more meaningful. He found himself taking extra time to connect with the people in the community, to be a presence they could rely on. The story of Amelia's rescue had quietly spread through the precinct and beyond. Though Michael hadn't sought recognition, it became an example of what compassion in law enforcement could achieve. His colleagues began to see him differently, not just as a stoic officer, but as someone who could inspire change through quiet, determined action. Lindsay's road to redemption was harder, marked with moments of progress and setbacks. She attended therapy sessions regularly, both for her own healing and to learn how to be a mother again. At first, her visits with Amelia were brief and awkward. Amelia was reserved, unsure of how to interact with the woman who had caused her so much pain. But over time, those visits began to change. Lindsay brought small gifts: a storybook, a sketch pad, or a box of Amelia's favorite crayons. She listened as Amelia talked about school, her drawings, or a funny story from her foster family. Slowly, Lindsay began to understand what it meant to be a parent, not just providing but being present, showing up even when it was hard. One rainy Saturday, Amelia surprised everyone by running into Lindsay's arms when she arrived for a visit. It was the first time Amelia had willingly initiated physical contact with her mother, and the tears in Lindsay's eyes spoke volumes. "You're trying, Mommy," Amelia said softly, her voice filled with a childlike wisdom that belied her years. "I see it." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a bridge. Lindsay clung to those words like a lifeline. As Amelia thrived and Lindsay continued her journey, Michael began to wrestle with his own feelings. Every time he left Amelia after a visit, his heart ached. He missed her laugh, her endless questions, and the way she looked at him like he was her anchor in a storm. One evening, as he sat in his quiet apartment, staring at yet another of her drawings pinned to his fridge, he realized something: Amelia had become a part of him. And more than anything, he wanted to be a permanent part of her life. The idea terrified him at first. He was just a cop, a man with a failed marriage and a history of pushing people away. But Amelia didn't see him that way. She saw him as her protector, her hero, and in her eyes, he saw a chance to be the father he had once longed to be. Michael met with Mark and Diane, the following week, sitting nervously at their dining table. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. "I'd like to adopt Amelia." Mark and Diane exchanged a look, their expressions softening with understanding. "She loves you, Michael," Diane said, "and we've seen how much you love her. If this is what you truly want, we'll support you every step of the way." The process wasn't easy. It took months of legal paperwork, interviews, and evaluations. Michael worked tirelessly to prove that he could provide a stable, loving home for Amelia. His colleagues rallied behind him, writing letters of support and offering to help however they could. The day of the adoption hearing was one of the most nerve-wracking of Michael's life. Amelia sat beside him in her best dress, her bunny clutched tightly in her lap. When the judge asked if she understood what was happening, Amelia nodded confidently. "Michael is my family," she said simply. "He's always been my family." The judge smiled, her voice warm as she finalized the adoption. "Then it's official. Congratulations, Mr. Bennett. Amelia is now your daughter." Tears filled Michael's eyes as he hugged Amelia tightly, her little arms wrapping around his neck. It was the happiest moment of his life. Life with Amelia wasn't perfect, but it was everything Michael had hoped for. They spent weekends exploring parks, baking cookies, and creating a new collection of drawings to fill the fridge. Michael made it a priority to keep Lindsay in Amelia's life, understanding that her mother's presence was vital to her healing. Their relationship remained supervised and carefully managed, but it was growing stronger with time. As Amelia flourished, so did Michael. He reconnected with his own estranged son, Ryan, and worked to repair their relationship. Ryan, now a teenager, began to visit on weekends, quickly bonding with Amelia over their shared love of art and mischief. One evening, as the three of them sat on the porch watching the sunset, Amelia turned to Michael. "Do you think the stars are happy tonight?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Michael smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "I think they're proud," he said, "because no matter how dark it gets, they always find a way to shine." Amelia beamed, her laughter filling the air. For the first time in years, Michael felt whole. His journey with Amelia had changed him, teaching him the true meaning of family, resilience, and love. And as the stars began to twinkle above, Michael knew that their story, a story of redemption, hope, and unwavering courage, was just beginning. Together, they had found their light. The years that followed were a testament to the power of resilience and love. Michael and Amelia built the life together, one rooted in trust, warmth, and the understanding that family isn't just something you're born into. It's something you choose, something you nurture. Amelia grew into a bright and imaginative young girl. Her love for art flourished, and her sketches became more intricate, more joyful, each one telling a story of hope and creativity. She entered local art contests, often winning accolades not just for her talent, but for the heart and soul she poured into her work. Every piece carried a subtle but profound message. No matter how dark the world might seem, there's always a light to be found. Michael couldn't have been prouder. He attended every art show, beaming as he stood beside her, often tearing up as he saw how far she'd come. She was no longer the scared little girl clutching a teddy bear in the rain. She was confident, compassionate, and full of life. Lindsay continued her journey toward redemption. The relationship between her and Amelia was fragile but growing. Supervised visits turned into longer ones. And eventually, Lindsay earned the trust to spend full weekends with Amelia. Michael never wavered in his support of these visits. He knew how important it was for Amelia to have her mother in her life, and he admired Lindsay's determination to change. Amelia and Michael's story didn't just transform their lives, it rippled outward, touching the lives of others in their community. Inspired by Michael's unwavering dedication, the precinct started new programs aimed at fostering trust and connection between officers and the community they served. They established outreach initiatives to help families in crisis, offering support before situations escalated to tragedy. Michael took an active role in these programs, often sharing his journey with Amelia as a way to inspire others. He spoke at schools, community centers, and even police academies, emphasizing the importance of empathy, patience, and human connection in law enforcement. It's not just about enforcing the law, he would say during these talks. It's about protecting and uplifting the people we serve. Every person, every child, deserves a chance to feel safe and loved. His story resonated with many, sparking a wave of small but meaningful changes throughout the city. Officers began approaching their jobs with a renewed sense of purpose, looking for ways to connect rather than merely control. By the time Amelia reached her teenage years, her dreams had crystallized. She wanted to be an art therapist, inspired by the way drawing and painting had helped her heal. She often talked about creating a program for kids who had been through similar experiences, a place where they could find solace and expression through art. Michael supported her wholeheartedly. They spent countless evenings brainstorming ideas for her future, their conversations filled with laughter and hope. "You're going to change lives, Amelia," Michael told her one night as they sat in her art-filled room. "Just like you've changed mine." Amelia smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "Because of you, Dad, you gave me a chance to believe in myself." One summer evening, as Michael and Amelia sat under the stars, the quiet hum of crickets and the gentle rustle of the trees surrounded them. Ryan, now in college, had joined them for the weekend, and the three of them were sharing stories and laughter. Amelia leaned against Michael's shoulder, her voice soft as she gazed up at the night sky. "Do you ever think about that night, Dad, when you found me?" Michael nodded, his arm wrapped around her. "All the time. It changed everything." Amelia smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Me too. I think the rain was washing away all the bad things so we could find something better." Ryan chuckled, tossing a handful of popcorn into his mouth. "That's deep, kiddo." Amelia stuck her tongue out at him playfully, and the moment dissolved into laughter. But as Michael looked at his two children, his family, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. The storm that had once threatened to drown them had instead brought them together, forging bonds that would never break. Years later, when Amelia was an adult, her art therapy program became a reality. The studio she opened was filled with light, color, and the quiet hum of healing. Children and families came from all over, finding hope and connection in the space she had created. Michael, now retired, spent many afternoons at the studio, helping where he could and watching with pride as Amelia carried forward the legacy of love they had built together. And on the walls of the studio, amid the vibrant paintings and heartfelt messages from grateful families, hung one of Amelia's first drawings, a picture of a man standing in the rain, holding the hand of a little girl clutching a teddy bear. Below it, in Amelia's careful handwriting, were the words, "In every storm, there's someone willing to help you find the light."